Go ahead. All right. So we here again for the reading of the Young Lords book right here. The Young Lords, A Radical History by Johanna Fernandez. A lot of us been going over this recently for the last couple weeks. Been learning a whole lot about the Young Lords, particularly in the New York area. So we'll be going over that pretty soon. But as always, we always start off with the statement of unity for the Second Rainbow Coalition, so everybody understand why we even developed this programmatic unity that we all collectively have. So with that, I have my comrade Gabby share that to the screen, and she read it for us, and then we'll jump into the actual reading of the book.
Right on, right on. I'll begin reading it. I'll begin screen sharing right now. I hope you all can see this. Let me tilt my screen sideways. There we go. Can y'all see this?
Yep.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yep.
All right. I'll begin reading the Statement of Unity preface. The U.S. was founded as a colonial settler state based upon white supremacy and slavery, stealing the lands of the indigenous nations, breaking every treaty made with them, and confining them to quote-unquote reservations, concentration camps. As the country became more powerful, the ego sunk its claws into other nations, making war on Mexico and grabbing its northern territory, invading Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Philippines, um, and Hawaii, and either annexing them outright or making them colonies or neo-colonies. And in the 20th century, it became the major imperialist power of the world, exploiting both the people within its boundaries and those in every other country, flooding them with military intervention, and robbing them of their right to self-determination. As C.P. Newman stated, we have two enemies to fight, racism and capitalism. Between the two, capitalism is primary. Racism is a byproduct of capitalism. The working people of the world, of every ethnicity or nationality, face a common enemy that's destroying life on Earth. Our enemy is a small ruling class of property owners controlling most of the world's wealth and resources. We must have our basic needs met to live a good and meaningful life. Food, shelter, healthcare, education, freedom from the oppression of the state, and peace with other nations. To obtain these essential things for life, we must have the power to see to it that the abundance that is available is shared equitably. Statement of Unity for the Second Rainbow Coalition. The legacy of the First Rainbow Coalition dates back to its founding on April 4th, 1969, by the original Black Panther Party, original Young Lords, Young Patriots Organization, and Young Patriots Organization. A number of other organizations joined this coalition not too long afterwards, such as the American Indian Movement, Brown Berets, Rising Up Angry, the Red Guards, and others. Since the founding of the United States, the masses had developed a number of popular movements that came together to fight back against this capitalist imperialist system in various ways around particular demands. Nevertheless, none had established a movement quite like the First Rainbow Coalition. This historic movement was the first of its kind that established a model of class struggle like no other. Its charismatic leader, Chairman Fred Hampton of the Illinois chapter of the original Black Panther Party, said that at the end of the day, we weren't engaged in a quote unquote race struggle. He said that it's a class struggle, God damn it. By uniting with the various oppressed ethnicities and masses, they were able to bridge the gap between the various ethnic communities that white supremacy had long sought to keep divided. This class solidarity equipped them with a material basis and class consciousness to see their common class condition. Therefore, the necessity to form a united front against their common class oppressor, the capitalist imperialist ruling class. The ruling class viewed this as the greatest threat to their class rule, and subsequently used the entire oppressive forces of the state, police, courts, jails, prisons, intelligence agencies, etc., in order to crush this emerging revolutionary socialist movement. We refounded the Rainbow Coalition on May 14th, 2021, with the intent of upholding the legacy of the original Rainbow Coalition. We believe that this historic example is the model of the United Front that will best serve our class liberation. By upholding the template program of the original Black Panther Party, which was subsequently adopted and later expanded by the original Young Lords, Young Patriots Organization, and all other original Rainbow Coalition members, we establish our pragmatic unity. The six disciplinary rules that we uphold ties all organizations in our coalition to a common professional discipline. History has bestowed upon our generation a common class mission to fulfill. The representatives of the capitalist imperialist ruling class, represented by the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, cannot liberate us. It is their class intention and class interest to uphold our common class oppression. Therefore, it is only we, the oppressed masses of all ethnicities and nationalities, who must build the necessary class solidarity, class consciousness, organizational structures, and a united front that will ultimately liberate ourselves. This is what the Second Rainbow Coalition is committed to. This is the historical mission we intend to fulfill. Dare to struggle, dare to win. All members of the coalition, New African Black Panther Party, White Panther Party, Green Party of New Jersey, Poor People's Army, La Masa Nacional de Brown Berets, NASL, North Alabama School for Organizers, New Era Young Lords, and American Indian Movement Northeast Woodland Chapter. The 6 disciplinary rules. Number 1. Members will conduct themselves in a manner to bring credit to the coalition and will treat others with respect and politeness. Number 2. Members will be sober when on Rainbow Coalition business and will not engage in any criminal activity while a member. Number 3. No member will engage in violence except in the extremity of self-defense. Number 4. Members will not gossip nor be divisive to the unity of the Second Rainbow Coalition. Number 5. Members will not act as informers or work against the purpose of the Second Rainbow Coalition. And number 6. Nobody is authorized to speak for the Second Rainbow Coalition unless authorized to do so. And that is a statement of unity.
Thank you, Comrade Gabby. Well, I got a lot of people on here today. See Joe Gonzalez on here. Junior, I think this is the first time I've seen you on here. Might come to the other ones and stuff. So pleasure to have you on here, Comrade. So if this is the first time you coming on, I'm Kwame, one of the advisors for the Second Rainbow Coalition, along with Alyssa. She's on here today. She's a co-chair of the Second Rainbow Coalition with the trifecta leadership of the Second Rainbow Coalition. So I'm glad to have everyone on here. We're going to be reading, and Gabby's going to be showing this, screen sharing this as well. This is on page 166 if you got the book. I don't know what it is in the PDF, but it's Aaron Dirty Laundry, and we're going to be reading all the way from 166 to 178 today. All right.
Do y'all want me to start first, or does anyone else want to read first?
I was gonna kick this off. Okay.
Right on.
All right. Comrade Junior said, "Hey, y'all, first time attended this Zoom meeting with y'all. My name is Junior. I'm a part of the Pueblos Unidos Brown Berets from California, occupied in Kalula land. Pronouns he, him, L. All power to the people. Pleasure to have you on with us today, comrade. All right, I'm gonna kick it off, and if you want to start, take over after me. So we're starting right here, Aaron Dirty Laundry. The Young Lords' evolving struggle with the church was one of 1,000 diverse campaigns spearheaded by countless local groups. Their direct actions over the course of the decade played a major role in shifting public opinion on the cause of racial and economic inequality, the Vietnam War, women's rights, gay liberation, and beyond, and winning reforms. Although the New York Young Lords led the period's most prolonged protests against the church, they were not the only activists whose protests targeted religious institutions for aiding and abetting oppression. 7 months earlier, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee leader James Foreman led the first and best known of such actions on May 4th, 1969. He unfurled the Black Manifesto at the Progressive Riverside Church during services, demanding monetary reparation from white churches for their role in the enslavement and exploitation of Black Americans. The action encouraged others who, over the next 2 years, staged similar protests. Less than 2 weeks after the Foreman Declaration, the Young Lords used militant protests to compel the McCormick Seminary and Lincoln Park to disperse funds it had promised to a coalition of community groups for a low-income housing and neighborhood beautification development. As discussed in Chapter 1, the Chicago actions led to concessions on most of the coalition's demands. The New York Young Lords followed in the footsteps of Chicago. Against this backdrop, Reverend Karazaina's decision to call in the police on December 7th proved a critical error. Word of the bus, quote unquote, as the Young Lords called it, spread quickly in the press and in religious communities. Religious officials from a diverse range of denominations condemned the church leadership. The decision to invite the police to physically remove the Young Lords from the church was a terrible mistake, according to Black American clergyman Robert Chapman, who said the police behaved not like men, but like what many militants are prone to call them. Those who voiced immediate support for the Young Lords, including Reverend David Garcia of St. Mark's Episcopal Church on Lower East Side and Black radical Black Baptist minister Lucius Walker, an associate of Martin Luther King who supported James Forman's call for monetary reparations from white churches to Black Americans. Other religious figures denounced the NYPD's violent intervention in a conflict over serving breakfast to hungry children and warned against the specter of collaboration between conservative houses of worship and government of forces. The public record does not show whether or not Reverend Karazana was aware of the latest wave of state repression against the Black Panthers in New York and Chicago. However, his decision departed from the conciliatory disposition to protest adopted by churches in cities like New York. Others with more traditional views also took a stand against the violence. Late 1960s radicals were raising thorny questions about the complicity of long-standing American churches in slavery, their financial holdings, and unmet responsibilities to the poor. Congregants clamor for greater transparency, democracy, and racial diversification. Seminarians, young clergymen, women groups, and many Black members demanded that the church yoke spiritual ministering to problems of social and political import. In the context of growing scrutiny, the senior district leadership of the Methodist Church in New York refused to file criminal charges against the Young Lords and intervened to post bail and pay the medical bills of those injured. They understood the political fallout of these developments better than Reverend Carazana. For his part, the Young Lords was emboldened in his resolve to use the church for his breakfast program. A young Lord captured the fallout of the police bus as at the church, quote, when blood is shed and you see broken bones, it makes you more determined. And that's precisely what happened to us, unquote. The statement recalled the widespread radicalization occasioned by state repression against protesters captured retrospectively in images of police dogs, fire hoses, and gassing of protesters, the press corps, and doctors from Chicago to Birmingham. Determined to fill the church with supporters, the Sunday after December 7th bus, the Young Lords amplified their propaganda campaign and flyer distribution routine on the corner across from the church. Righteous anger emboldened them. They added impromptu speeches and sharpened their language, denouncing the December 7th incident as a police riot. In their bold recasting of the police as perpetrators of mob violence, the Young Lords inverted the term's underlying assumptions and seized its symbolic power to dramatize their story. As revolutionaries, they were honing sensibilities that acquired early in life as their parents' cultural and language intermediaries and putting them to political use. At their best, the Young Lords had keen grasp of the power of language, symbols, and stories that enlarged their message. In an interview from the period, Pablo Guzman credited the Reverend David Kirk of Amos House for illuminating the character of the police actions at the church in a telegram to the group, in which the Reverend also remarked that, quote, if Christ was alive today, he would be a young Lord, unquote. Within the FSUMC The church loosened the pastor's grip on his congregants. A small cohort questioned his judgment and voiced long-held misgivings about the church's insularity. These and other congregants urged the pastor to reach out to young parishioners who had become inactive in their late teenage years, but whose generational insights might help diffuse the conflict. Distress by calls from the city's dissenting ministers and specter of another encounter with the young lords, the pastor conceded. He invited young participants to come Sunday service where the young lords were once again expected on December the 14th. One young practitioner, Joe Petrie, who arrived early, remembers the scene humorously. Quote, the media was everywhere, and everyone was playing to the media on both sides. Felipe Luciano was naturally Mr. Charismatic and Mr. Eloquence, a media darling. And there were others from the church who talked to the media too. It was a circus outside, unquote. Approximately 500 people, the majority young Lord sympathizers, lined up outside waiting to cram into the church. This was not what Reverend Calrazana had imagined, but warned by the New York Methodist Church leadership to avoid escalating the conflict, he did not block their entry. Near the end of the service, after a tense whisper exchange with the young lords, the pastor agreed to meet with a small delegation. One young lord was allowed to address the congregation, stating, quote, we did not come to ask for money. We only asked for the use of space in this church, unquote. At the end of the service, sympathizers remained in their pews during the 3-hour meeting that followed among the Young Lords' 5 Central Committee leaders. Young Lords cadre Denise Oliver, the church board, the pastor, and the previously inactive young parishioners. The meeting began with tension and ended with acrimony. In their role as unofficial mediators, the church youth struggled with both sides. Carmen Petrie explains, quote, you got this Cuban minister who was chased out of this homeland for political reasons. Pro-Batistas probably. And then in comes Felipe, who was raised in a Pentecostal church and knew to go into a church properly dressed. My beef with the young lords is that if you want to be camouflaged in a Protestant church, your best camouflage is a shirt and tie. But they came in with afros and berets looking like the children of Che Guevara. The clash was immediate. All along, Carrazana must have been freaking out, thinking he was back in Cuba. They were not going to get to square one under no circumstance because of what they were wearing. So from day one, the young lords messed up, unquote. Despite Carmen's disagreement with the young lords' get up, she was struck that the board members kicked off the meeting with a denigrating description of Puerto Ricans she heard growing up. According to Carmen, these comments were later reiterated by congregation members. Sister Jimenez, who pulled her aside and said in Spanish, quote, uh, you know, probably somebody mute their mic. You know why they don't have money? Because they see them buying beer in the bodega with their welfare check instead of buying breakfast for their children, and then they want us to feed their children breakfast. Carmen emphasized, quote, and this was a Christian lady speaking, unquote. The young lords countered that the church had simply repackaged for religious audiences state propaganda, blaming the poor for conditions out of their control. They added that the Puerto Ricans were driven out of their homeland by U.S. economic policies and that the racism, the dilapidated schools, and unemployment were a source of their woes. Carmen hadn't heard anyone of her generation speak of poverty and migration as passionately, as cogently as she did that day. Quote, here I am being exposed to the arguments of a group of educated Puerto Ricans who were pissed off about a situation that I'm pissed off about, unquote. To her, it was, quote, one big education. I didn't completely agree with their tactics, but everything they said made sense, unquote. She and the other participants were treading on dangerous ground. The same youth group met again the next day with select board members, voicing the ideal that perhaps they, quote, could implement and carry out certain programs and work with the community in general, unquote. Quote. They were met with resentment, accused of sympathizing with the young lord's arguments, scolded for having aired the church's, quote, dirty laundry in public, unquote, branded as Judases and excluded from subsequent negotiations. In an interview with First Source later this week, uh, Pablo Guzman summarized the political divisions between the young lords and the board. Quote, the people of the board of the First Spanish Church told us that we were Satan, that if poor people wanted, they could educate themselves. Their idea is that Puerto Rican people dig being poor, and they made it through hard work, so why can't everybody else? They think that Puerto Rican women on welfare spend their money on beer. They play the numbers, and they really dig the gutter. It took a whole lot to hold our tempers, unquote. The board presumed that the poor brought poverty onto themselves through their lack of personal drive and work ethic, purportedly driven by wayward values and irresponsible behavior. This subgroup of Puerto Ricans was cast as different. The reasoning implied that the poor did not deserve sympathy and that help would enable shiftlessness and deepen dependence, all of which justified the board's refusal to allow use of the church to feed poor children and offer classes to the community. These were the oldest ideals about poverty in the United States, promulgated by English colonialists who believed that poor lacked the moral character, hard work, and discipline required for salvation. They also drove the logic of 19th century poorhouse reformers who responded to the growth of poverty with proposals to institutionalize the poor. In the 1960s, amid a new wave of displacement occasioned by post war economic and demographic changes, these ideals gained widespread political currency when social scientists developed a theory of culture to explain poverty. They argued that low income people were trapped in a self perpetuating culture of poverty, a web of interlocking pathological behaviors that hindered their economic advancement. Developed by anthropologist Oscar Lewis in his 1959 study of Mexicans and reiterated by political scientist Michael Harrington in his 1962 bestseller, The Other America, the theory emphasized the cultural effects of social and economic exclusion on the social fabric of poor communities. It argued that poor engaged in deviant behaviors that, when passed down to their children, reproduce in intergenerational cycles of poverty. Harrington wrote, quote, there is a language of the poor, a psychology of the poor, a worldview of the poor. To be impoverished is to be an internal alien, to grow up in a culture that is radically different from the one that dominates the society, unquote. Despite Lewis' admiration for his subject's resilience, he chastised Puerto Ricans for valuing, quote, acting out more than thinking out, self-expression more than self-constraint, pleasure more than productivity, spending more than saving, personal loyalty more than personal justice, unquote. Counteropposed to the Protestant ethic, the founding system of values routinely deployed by the country's ruling elite to assert social control, these value-laden judgments of the poor distorted their humanity and classified them as a threat to the country's social and moral fabric. In 1965, Daniel Patrick Moynihan penned a more analytical study of the Black family. He underscored the crisis of unemployment among Black men and centuries of discrimination, but also argued that other fundamental problems were at work, a tangle of pathology. Out of wedlock children, welfare dependency, and the authoritarian dominance of Black matriarchs. These oversimplified representations of people living in poverty bore little resemblance to the distinctive protagonists in East Harlem's unfolding drama. The young lords, with their vision of a new world, and the hardworking Puerto Rican worshipers with whom they were in battle. Riding on the heels of the communist targeted Red Scare, these writers emphasized descriptions of poverty over analysis of its root causes, partly to avoid the association of their studies with Marxism. Their goal was to rehabilitate a sense of public mission among white middle class Americans steeped in a culture of consumerism. In the end, these studies imparted academic legitimacy to old ideals linking poverty to pathological behavior and validated the erroneous public discourse that poverty was primarily a problem of people of color. Above all, the studies formalized a new and more resilient racism wherein culture replaced biological explanations for inferior social status. The Young Lords battle with the FSUMC is one of many examples, largely unknown, of how people of color use protest and direct action as a crowbar into public debate and to challenge the logic of these enduring arguments. The Young Lords returned to the church on Sunday, December 21st. COINTELPRO documents noted that they were not allowed to speak and that at the end of the service, they took their message outside into the icy December cold, where Felipe Luciano, Luciano gave a moving speech next to the church. Quote, the partitioners have not stayed. So basically, we're talking to ourselves, he said. Luciano's speech expressed a range of emotion, an earnest commitment to the idea of a beloved community, and a sense that the partitioners were betraying the young. Quote, they turned their backs on babies, turned their backs on young people who were saying to them, yes, we agree. You are our mothers and fathers. Yes, we want to work in cooperation with you, unquote. You want to take over from here, Gabby?
Of course. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
No, I'll begin reading. What page do we stop at again, Comrade Kwame?
He said 178, I believe.
170. Gotcha.
One.
Well,
are you saying I stopped at, or were we supposed to stop at?
No. Where are we supposed to stop at?
All right. Yeah, 178.
178. Gotcha. Thanks. All right. Those witnessing the conflict might well have marveled at the role of reversal orchestrated by the Young Lords. Luciano warned, quote, the problems of this world, much less East Harlem, will not be solved by people being adamant, being like stones. They will be resolved when you are open, when you're flexible, when you're receptive in some way. We are asking all we are asking for is for them to allow our babies, not mine, our babies, call it socialism if you want, to allow our babies to come inside and eat a hot breakfast. You know, the thing, the thing that Jesus encouraged. Oh, God. According to Luciano, the FSUMC congregation adopted, quote, the whole American scene of vertical mobility, that you can move out of the problem of the ghetto, you move out of the sensitivity they once had, unquote. He linked their worldview to that of the
Sadducees and Pharisees.
Sadducees and the Pharisees, the elders of the tribe of Israel, whom Jesus condemned, and citing Matthew 12, 12. I don't know how to read Bible stuff. 12:12. Remind his audience that, quote, Jesus actually went into the church and beat them. And he can talk about us being violent. And he told them, get out of here, you money lenders. You are filth. All you're thinking of is filthy lucre. And you are not thinking about the spirit of the law, unquote. That's fucking awesome. God, that made me fucking laugh. To Luciano, the problem of want in East Harlem was inextricably tied to the spiritual crisis among Puerto Ricans produced by colonial subjugation on their island nation. Central to the project of Puerto Rican spiritual salvation, in his view, was ensuring that, quote, our babies understand that the nature of imperialism, understand the true nature of their country, Puerto Rico, understand the independence movement in Puerto Rico. We have Puerto Rican children who don't know who their revolutionary heroes are, who don't have their language, who do not know their culture, and we will die. Unquote. Felipe's speech on repression and political economy is an example of oratory, oratory, oratory elevated into art. His remarks inspired participants to stay the course and more. Impassioned, emotional, vulnerable, and honest, moments like these convey the humanism of socialist politics and present a portrait of Puerto Ricans di, diametrically opposed to their one-dimensional portrayals in the media. Yep, that's cultural revolution right there. Violent police repression at their protests and potential fatalities weighed heavily on the young lords' collective conscience. They told the press that they, quote, did not seek confrontations with the police because that would be tantamount to suicide, unquote. In an interview with El Dario La Prensa, Luciano explained that the young lords, quote, never threatened anyone with physical violence. We don't carry weapons. The funds we use for our programs are obtained through private donations. The food we distribute during our children's breakfast programs we obtain through written requests to the chain stores that benefit from the Puerto Rican community that buys their products, unquote. In the context of the recent assassination of Fred Hampton, death was a real possibility for these radicals. Their only protection was board public support. Hundreds rallied in their support since December 7th, and thousands were following the story closely, quietly rooting for the team with the Purple Berets. With his right arm in a cast and a patch on his head, Luciano appealed to young Lord supporters to commit what we believed would be a protracted struggle. Yep. The young lords will not be moved. We may lose your support. We don't know. With the first fire of enthusiasm, everyone is in the church, but as time begins to pass, support begins to petter down. But we're not going to stay here. We want you here because sorry, but we're going to stay here. We want you here because you are going to keep us from getting killed. And don't take it lightly. I don't know how I'll be able to live if one of our people is killed. What do you tell a mother whose 15-year-old boy, who is a member of the Young Lords, is killed by a 38 Smith Wesson bullet? What do you tell her? He died for the revolution? All she sees is the loss of her son. That's why we need you here. Right on. The COINTEL Pro information for the day reported that the Young Lords participated in the services and their demonstrations ended, quote, in a peaceful manner, unquote, with, quote, no incidents or arrests, unquote. The offensive.
No, hold on for a minute. The COINTEL informant. Remember, you said information, but the COINTEL informant.
The COINTEL informant
out there.
Yeah, right. Sorry, I said formation or sorry.
That's okay. Mistakes are natural.
Yep. The offensive. On Sunday, December 28th, the Young Lords leadership placed children at the helm of a silent procession. It began just outside their office and marched into the chapel of the FSUMC. The scene mirrored the controversial use of children protesters in Birmingham 6 years earlier, which galvanized support for the civil rights movement globally when the city's public safety commissioner fire hose, unleashed dogs on, and jailed many of the children. In both cities, the symbolic participation of youngsters reflected the movement's hopes for a better society. At the East Harlem Church, the Young Lords arrived early and sat quietly in the pews. It seemed a reprise of previous exchanges. At the end of the service, the Young Lords Minister of Education, Juan Gonzalez, rose to address the congregation. As of on cue, the group's defense committee also stood and with railroad spikes nailed shut the church doors from the inside. As the young lords moved to consolidate their position, um, parishioners turned their heads in dread, and an ominous pallor befilled the room. Gonzalez announced that the young lords were occupying the building and that the pastor was to blame. Carmen Pietri recalls an exchange with Juan Gonzalez. When she asked what was going on, he responded, "We're not talking anymore. No more dialogue." She was devastated because in an earlier meeting in the young lord's office, when the group proposed a church occupation, the church youth argued against it, and the young lords assured them that they would not occupy the building. Uncertain of quote unquote what was going to happen, Carmen later described the congregation's detention as a traumatic moment. Meanwhile, the eyes of the judgment focus on the church youth. Mira, te lo dije. Mira lo que esos peluces le están haciendo a la iglesia. Look at what's happening. We told you. Look at what those kids with the afros are doing to the church. Joe Petrie remembers that Juan F. Ortiz yelled out from the altar that the FSUMC was now re-Christianed, the People's Church. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Others soon arrived with reinforcements, quote unquote, tools of the occupation, including martial arts, nunchuck sticks for defense in case of a police attack. The morning, Bella August, the trusted white supporter and psychological doctoral student at Metropolitan Hospital who participated in the lead offensive, was sent on a blind mission to the young lord's office, where Denise Oliver gave her materials to deliver to the church at a designated time. Like a Santera priestess, Oliver placed chains over Bella's head and around her neck. But unlike the colorful beaded necklace of Yoruba initiation ceremonies, these were steel industrial chains, concealed by her heavy coat. As Bella walked to the church, she thought longingly about her own daughter and feared the violence that might befall the radicals if they chose to use these chains in battle. She was ushered through one door that had not been nailed shut. As instructed, she handed the chains to Mickey Melendez. To her immense relief, he clarified how they would be used. Like the outer workers in Flint, Michigan, who worked at the General Motors Fisher body plant, occupied the factory and wielded steel frames around each of its doors in 1936, during the first sit-down strike in U.S. history. The young lords reinforced the nailed church doors with chains to block the police. So began the young lords' church offensive. Nailing shut the FSUMC doors was both sacrilegious and liberatory. The nailing of the doors recalled the suffering of Jesus on the cross and the FSUMC's collective penance for straying from the path of God. To the Methodist leadership and to Carranzana, these developments signaled a violation of constitutionally protected religious freedom that evoked a moment in 1680 when Puritan authorities nailed shut the doors of a Baptist church in Boston. To others, the young lord's actions might well have evoked the moment when Martin Luther launched the Reformation by nailing his 95 thesis to a church in Wittenberg, Germany. The young lords invited the parishioners to stay and join the revolutionary ministering that evening, but the parishioners wanted out. Within an hour, those who wished to leave the building exit through the single man door that throughout the occupation remained accessible for those who wished to leave. The young lords also shepherded children out of the building. By then, they had negotiated an agreement. The pastor, who was in close contact with the NYPD, assured that the young lords that there would be no police raid. The activists' demand now included a space for a liberation school and a daycare center. They stated that they would leave only after officials granted them space to feed free breakfast to approximately 50 to 75 children. As parishioners filed out and walked down the church steps, about 35 remained outside singing hymns in Spanish. They joined a growing crowd in Lexington Avenue, where police had shut down traffic, to witness an occupation of a place worship by a group of Puerto Rican radicals. The church occupation risked widespread condemnation by church-going residents in East Harlem, but the young lord's graceful execution thrust the organization into the national spotlight and highlighted its nerve and the political savvy of the group. The success of their occupation depended on a sophisticated deconstruction of church ideology. Aware of the potential backlash of a predominantly church-going community of recent migrants, the young lords prepared to make their case to the community. Led by Pablo Guzman, later that afternoon, and every morning thereafter for the duration of the occupation, they held a press conference in the main chapel to keep the community abreast of their activities. At the press conference, Juan Gonzalez called on his 10 years Catholic altar boy service to elevate their message in the battle of ideas. Citing scripture, he argued that the East Harlem Church had forgotten the teachings of the historic Jesus. It's just incredible to us how a simple thing like a request to grant a space has resulted in so much trouble in East Harlem. Our only understanding of it is that organized religion, has so enslaved our people, has so destroyed their minds in thinking that of salvation and the hereafter, that they refuse to deal with the conditions they have now and the oppression they have now. It's amazing to us how people can talk about Jesus, who walked among the poor, the poorest, the most oppressed, the prostitutes, the drug addicts of his time, that these people who claim to be Christian have forgotten that it was Jesus who said that it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. That right there, that's basically describing my parents. From the young lord's perspective, nailing the church doors inverted the public crucifixion of Jesus. The revolutionary and political prisoner who led a movement of the poor that challenged the power of the Roman Empire, its colonial rule of Palestine, and the corruption, wealth, and power of local elites. Under the young lord's leadership, the church would be open to grassroots communion, led by the oppressed and driven by a commitment to the material and spiritual well-being of the surrounding community. This reimagining of the church's role was already a movement in Latin America. There is embodied that the teachings of the Brazilian teacher. There embodied the teachings of the Brazilian teacher and philosopher Paulo Freire, I believe, Freire, who sought to find Freire, right? Who sought to find practical application of the teachings of Frantz Fanon, the monetician, psychiatrist, and fierce defender of the Algerian Revolution. Fanon's theoretical writings on colonization's impact on the colonized transformed the canon of the Western social and political thoughts. At the press conference, the young lords called on New Yorkers to support and participate in their daily medley of activities at the church, including a medical clinic, a lead and anemia testing drive, the free children's breakfast program, a series of political education classes, and nightly cultural events. By emerging militant action with projects that prefigured a new socialist society in the present, the Young Lords, like the Black Panthers, expanded the vision and work of the U.S. Revolutionary Left. Mayor John V. Lindsay immediately deployed an aide to the scene. According to Sid Dafodoff, the mayor's field manager, the occupation presented Lindsay with a significant challenge. With media buzzing around the church, news of another bloody scene with protesters and police would surely travel around the world. It would damage the image of his liberal administration and his aspirations to higher office. There were also false rumors that the Young Lords were holding a priest hostage, even though Reverend Carazana had left the church of his own accord. The mayor wanted to intervene personally, but Davidoff advised against it. Over the course of the many conflicts of the late 1960s, the mayor's team had developed a policy of working with municipal representatives whom aggrieved parties, quote unquote, could recognize and relate to. Davidoff suggested that Arnie Segara, the mayor's Puerto Rican aide and ambassador in the Puerto Rican community, quote unquote, go in there and begin a negotiation. Segara had been among a small group of young men who attempted to redirect and quell the violence of East Harlem's riots of 1967. Fucking comprador, fucking neocolonial bastard. That's Segara, who also, quote unquote, tall and an extremely good-looking guy, whom women loved, quote unquote, made his identity as a local sports hero turned political insider even more alluring. Segara was joined by Reverend Norman Eddy, the director of the Interfaith Council of Churches located near Columbia University. Given that Segara had corresponded with the Young Lords earlier during the garbage offensive, he was able to talk his way into the church with a portable phone powered by a mammoth battery pack. Davidoff reported sending Segara in with clear instructions. Quote, when you go into that situation, you get the lay of the land. 10 minutes to 15 minutes. You call out. Tell me what it is I need to start working on, unquote. However, in the course of discussion between the Young Lords and Segara, the unexpected happened. Davidoff reported, a half hour goes by, 40 minutes go by, and I finally get him on the 20-way, and I said, what the fuck are you doing there? What's going on? He says, we're talking. I say, what are you talking about? He says, well, I think they're right. I'm staying here with them. Oh my fucking God, when your plan fucking backfires. I couldn't believe this was happening to me. This was the worst day of my life. I didn't even know what they were right about. At which point I said, Arnie, you're fired. If I ever see you again, I'll probably arrest you if I can figure out how to do it, unquote. That's fucking hilarious. I fucking love that shit. When you're fucking when your comprador ends up fucking becoming a class traitor, that's hilarious. When media outlets asked how they would respond to a police siege or a court injunction, Minister of Information Pablo Guzman replied, quote, we will do whatever is tactically sound, unquote. According to COINTEL documents, a press conference the following day in the basement of the church was, quote, covered by 3 TV networks, Associated Press, United Press, and local newspapers, unquote. At one of the press conferences, Guzman proclaimed that the Young Lords, quote, quote unquote, were one with the Cuban Revolution and supported independence of all Latin American countries and the building of a socialist society. Guzman continued, even though we're revolutionaries, what we do with love. To a lot of the people, there is a contradiction between love and revolution. But Che Guevara said, true revolution is guided by a feeling of love. Well fucking said. Would anyone like to read?
Anyone else want to take over? This is the last part. You got
Yep.
this Alyssa?
Yep.
All right.
All right. It's got to be only like 2 pages, right?
Yeah, 2 pages.
Okay. All right. Holding it down. The Young Lord's high-profile actions at the East Harlem Church drew a steady stream of media coverage spotlighting facets of Puerto Rican life previously unseen by most New Yorkers. Video clips and images on the evening news and in newspapers captured the Young Lord's impassioned project and political vision. They called the Church Offensive, which, like the Garbage Offensive, nodded to the National Liberation Front's 1968 Tet Offensive in Vietnam. The action evidenced the group's power to quickly shift public discourse through strategic messaging and deliberate leveraging of the era's new media. Interlaced with the teachings of the historic Jesus, their compelling narrative blamed capitalism, colonialism, and complicit church establishments for social problems, and in the process dislodged culture of poverty theories from local discourse. Inside the occupied church, the Young Lords programs held wide appeal. They collaborated with professionals and community residents to feed, heal, and educate the people. From clergymen and elected officials to pop stars and civic leaders, the controversy drew diverse voices into the fray. It propelled multiple generations of Puerto Ricans out of the shadows into the public square, at the church and beyond, a grassroots awakening of that cohered self-definition for many, and strengthened the place of Puerto Ricans in the polity. Images projected in the mainstream media were radical. They unseated longstanding distortions of Puerto Ricans as junkies, knife-wielding thugs, welfare dependents, and violent rioters. Sustained for weeks after the occupations, and these new representations helped civilize New Yorkers' perceptions of the city's second largest radicalized group. The church occupation was part of a diverse wave of actions by New Left activists of color across the country that changed the way overt manifestations of racism came to be viewed in U.S. society. One of the major socio-cultural imprints of the 1960s movement on American history. The waves of reporters, curious visitors, East Harlem residents, police informants, Young Lord supporters, and self-appointed, what the heck is that word?
Interlocutors.
All right, sure. That visited the church first had to pass muster at the front door. Members of the YLO security ministry were stationed there in shifts and at each of the nailed doors. They searched for weapons and drugs and outlined the occupation's protocols. Visitors were asked to respect the altar and spaces of worship, to exercise care with the furniture and in common spaces, and to refrain from behavior that could be construed as desecrating the church. Smoking was not allowed inside. Most who entered availed themselves of the Young Lord's services or delivered food, medical supplies, books, posters, flyers, or piles of clothing, which the group requested for distribution to the community. The group's military-style occupation involved a complex operation requiring high levels of strategy, organization, and discipline. From their daily briefing and their 24-hour security detail to the consolidation of a support network and preparations for their daily health, education, and children's breakfast program, the Young Lord's operation was meticulously well thought out. By day, the church had the feel of a well-run school and hospital. Even critical accounts of the occupation lauded the discipline of the group's daily routine. Quote, at the end of each afternoon, regular activities stopped and all the hands, including visitors, were put to work mopping and cleaning the premises, unquote. The New York Post reported that the Young Lords, quote unquote, held the church like a fort. One of the dozens of letters the Young Lords wrote and delivered to a local shop owner requesting food donation for the breakfast program gives a sense of their methodical approach and organizational capacity. In it, Young Lord Hiram, I lost my spot, Maristani writes, quote, "Unfortunately, we did not receive a response to our letter. Since it had been over 2 weeks, we are again writing to you because we would appreciate an answer in order to meet with you to relate our program to you firsthand," unquote. They kept passerby information with a loudspeaker affixed to the building's exterior, on which they played speeches of Malcolm X, Pedro Albizu Campos, and Fred Hampton, among others, interspersed with political music. This included Eddie Pamelari's Justicia, those whose lyrics demanded justice for Puerto Ricans and Black Americans, the pro-independence music of Pepe y Flora, and Daniel Santos' band nationalist album Grito de Lares. The press release, I said that wrong. The press referenced the impressions, quote unquote, "Mighty, mighty, Spade and Whitey." What the heck? Did I say that? The press referenced the impressions, "Mighty, mighty, Spade and Whitey." All right. Written with the Curtis Mayfield song's bold lyrics warned against American global power and the consequence of racial polarization domestically. Although the Young Lords defended Black power for its assertion of Black human dignity in the face of supremacist calls for white power, the song's refrain must have spoken to the group's experience at the margins of the country's rigid race paradigm. Quote unquote, "And mighty, mighty," oh God, "mighty, mighty, Spade and Whitey, your Black and white power is going to be a crumbling tower." I'm going to have to look up that song or something. Midway through the occupation, an in-depth radio segment produced by KPFA in Berkeley, California, reported that the Young Lords had provided hundreds of free meals to children. It took its listeners behind the scenes of the operation. Young Lord Luis Nunez, a former Vietnam medic, ran the kitchen in the occupied church. He explained that the Young Lord's health ministry consulted with the nutritionist who set quote unquote standards of the quote unquote right amount of starch, vitamins, and nutrients of every meal, including the signature for children's breakfast program. Their objective was to offer poor children the dignity and satisfaction of eating like quote unquote like a rich man, and the quote unquote chance to feel what it's like to eat bacon and eggs and juice and cocoa and bread and jelly and all sorts of things that they don't get at home. In New York, both the Young Lords and Black Panthers were known for serving bacon, which many poor children and their families considered a treat. A print media reported that the Young Lords had performed for children a revised miracle of the loaves and fishes. The program included an early morning political education class geared toward the children and their parents. Am I reading too much? Or is it
one more paragraph?
Okay. You're okay.
I just wanted to make sure. All right. After breakfast, the Young Lords prepared for an inflow of East Harlem visitors seeking medical care at the church's free health clinic or screening for tuberculosis, anemia, and childhood lead poisoning. The improvised clinic was staffed by approximately 24 progressive doctors, nurses, medical technicians, and interns, and residents from nearby Metropolitan Hospital. Among them, its chief medical resident, Jean Strauss. These included some of the same medical professionals with whom the Young Lords conducted the door-to-door medical visits discussed in the previous chapter, and others such as Dr. Richard Stone were assigned to the church by the hospital as a concession to the Young Lords. The operation offered its medical cohort the rare opportunity to erect and manage community-based medical care that implemented protocols for personalized medical treatment, counterposed to the impersonal, high-volume atmosphere of a large hospital. The change of venue alone facilitated a more humane exchange between patient and doctor. All right, I guess that was a good time.
Thank you, comrades. So that's the conclusion of this part of the reading today. I think like listening along and reading along with this chapter, one of the things it highlights is that the class struggle is a concrete class struggle. It's like are the institutions in our community, are they fighting for our community? Are they about self-determination and liberation? Or are those colonial institutions maintaining the worldview, the social relations, the stigmatization that the establishment places on our community? The Young Lords show, that they was waging this class struggle against one of a common institution that's in our community, the churches. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
On time, churches either play a liberation role in our fight for freedom, or they play roles of maintaining our oppression. You know what I'm saying? And I think this kind of highlights why even the institutions in our community must be challenged. If they don't, meet the needs of the community. You know what I'm saying? And I think this highlights as well how like taking on these controversial type of challenges of these institutions actually raise the consciousness of the population in that community. It led to them providing free breakfast to children. It led to them providing testing for different diseases, medical testing, hospital that people, and even some of the hospitals nearby sent nurses and doctors to help staff and work with the Young Lords. You know what I mean? So this kind of exposed the contradictions within how these institutions was being used. Formerly, they weren't doing this for the community. It took these radical, revolutionary Young Lords to put down the occupation of this colonial institution, because that's how it was being used, and forced them to open up its doors and use it for the interest of the community. And I like how they was kind of contrasting that with the message that of Jesus. You know what I'm saying? About posting being for the poor, standing with the most oppressed and stuff like that. But it's like, what is this happening in practice in y'all community? Y'all don't even do this. Y'all actually upholding the same type of narrative that the establishment, that the system say against the Puerto Rican community. You know what I mean? So I think this highlights, why we have to control the institutions in our community. If we don't control the institutions in our community, they're gonna be used against our community. You know what I mean? Comrade Gabby, I see your hand up.
Right on, comrade. Right on, comrade Kwame. Right on. And I've said this before, and I've said it again. Christianity and religion as a whole is not inherently reactionary. It's not. Christianity is not the problem. The problem is Christianity being co-opted and used by these imperialists and being whitewashed to uphold their contradictions, and being used to embolden, bolster, and to increase reactionary sentiments and individualistic behavior. That's the problem, because just like how religion can be used in a revolutionary way, it can be used in a reactionary way, and this right here shows how as you were saying, how the Young Lords took these institutions and made their own institutions, their own revolutionary institutions. Because if we don't take these institutions, if we don't manage our communities by building these survival programs, by educating them, elevating them, engaging cultural revolution, and providing for their needs by struggling alongside them, then we're doomed to fail. Ideological and political line mean everything when it comes to revolution. You can have the militancy, but if you don't have the correct ideological and political line, if you don't have the correct principled analysis on things, they are doomed to fail. The Young Lords saw how the church was being used and has been used to uphold the oppression, subjugation, and exploitation of colonized groups. They saw that, and they engaged in transforming that institution into a revolutionary institution, by taking control of it. So right on.
No doubt. Appreciate that, comrade. Go to Alyssa, Robert Strong, and then Alyssa.
Man, I have so many things about this chapter. Before I went into the study of social sciences, I was a seminarian. I was raised in a fundamentalist church, and my dad is still a fundamentalist pastor. Yeah, I have thoughts and feelings. I would love to see some of these fundamentalist churches that are cranking out all this hate-filled, anti-queer, racist propaganda, but they all have militias now, and it's kind of amazing how the reactionary religious side has almost mutated into the Christian Taliban. And it's something I sort of predicted back in the early aughts. And when I shifted from my seminary studies to social sciences, it was partially because I was doing this master's thesis at the time on religious extremist groups. And, my research advisor wanted me to focus on Muslim extremists, but one of my theses I was working with was that the seeds for what we're looking at as, that's the clash of cultures, the Muslim extremists, the seeds of that same type of extremism are growing rapidly within Christianity. And that's where we are. That's where we are today. Some of these mega churches that are cranking out this hateful fascist propaganda, they need to be seized and the resources need to be redistributed. How that tactically minimal loss of life is a big question, but at some point it's going to have to happen. And at the same time, I have dove deep enough into mystical experience and study to know that the heart of the Christ message is this radical Nazorian saint who believed in a lot of radical simplicity, where you fight and struggle for the cause of the poor and oppressed, and fight against the rich to make sure that debts are released on the year of Jubilee. That was the order of the Nazorian, and there's so much anti-Catholic richness and narrative. It's one of the things I really like about Brother Cornel West is, even though dialectical materialist is my first language these days, my second language, possibly the dialectic to my dialectical materialism, is I still really enjoy talking liberation theology. And I think that if postmodern communism can learn to work a certain religious paradigm, they'll win over a lot more of the mass base than they've done the first few revolutions. Those are just some of my many thoughts. Thank you for letting me to share, comrades.
Absolutely, right on. Comrade. Yeah, and I totally agree with you. We cannot be dogmatic. I think everybody know. Y'all read my book. I'm an atheist. I used to be a Christian. For various reasons, no longer a religious or spiritual person. But one thing I do recognize is that, like what Comrade Rob just said, we have to be able to relate to the ones that's using their religion for liberation. Like liberation theology has always formed a good, strong alliance with revolutionaries, communists, and that's across the world. Down there in Central America during the 80s and stuff, during Nicaragua, David Ortega and all that stuff. A lot of that was liberation theology that was uniting with Marxists. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, Oscar Romero was a really good one from that period.
Yeah, and we've had a history of revolutionaries uniting with liberation theology. To me, if you're not talking about liberation theology, you're talking about colonialism. You're using that religion, whatever religion. I don't care if it's Christianity, Islam, whatever. Using it for liberation. Using it for colonial purposes. You know what I'm saying? So as long as it's being used as a form of liberation, I think we have to unite as revolutionary, no matter what we believe or how we see the theology or the ideology that comes from it, the origins, the evolution of it. We have to unite with all people that's going to unite with us, that's going to liberate us. You dig what I'm saying? We cannot be dogmatic. You dig what I'm saying? I'm speaking as a communist and an atheist saying that. You know what I mean? I think we made mistakes in the past when we failed to realize that the various groups. That's one reason why I work with street organizations. I know a lot of y'all see that I work with the Vice Lords and the GDs. You know what I mean?
Saw that video.
Yeah, right. You know what I mean? That's for the same reason. We don't all share that. We're not a monolithic community, but we got to unite with the people that wants to build unity in our community, that wants to get back to supporting our community, building institutions in our community, uniting with other oppressed communities intercommunally, and understanding this struggle is a class struggle that, you know, are standing with our Chicano brothers and sisters. You know what I mean? Standing with our LGBTQIA plus brothers and sisters. You know what I'm saying? Across the board. Like, this is the only way we're gonna liberate ourselves. This is the message that we should get out of the first Rainbow Coalition. You know what I mean? When Fred Hampton put that together back in 1969, that was all the oppressed people. Even Fred Hampton, Huey P. Newton and them wrote a piece called Women's Liberation and Gay Liberation, uniting with the at that time was called the Gay Liberation Movement, uniting with those struggles. You know what I'm saying? Because if we don't, we're not going to create the society that we want to live in, where we have this freedom to wrestle with different ideals and come to our own conclusions. You dig what I'm saying? And this is what it's about. Being a revolutionary ain't trying to force our ideals on it. It's to get people to wrestle with ideals to come to their conclusions by challenging themselves. You dig what I'm saying? With a scientific analysis. It's putting our line out there and letting them struggle with our line and come to their own conclusions about life, reality, consciousness, all those different things. So, right on, Comrade Rob. I see Alyssa, and then I want to get some of my Chicano brothers and sisters on here. I see a lot of y'all joined today. Our pleasure to have y'all on here with us today. Go ahead, Alyssa. And she's the only word on here today I see, except Jorge Nieves. He's an elder young lord. If you didn't know, he was a Attica brother during the Attica uprising, and was a chairman of the Young Lords inside Attica. So we got two Young Lords on here, an elder and a present day.
Right on.
Comrade Jorge put his hand up too, but his actual physical hand, so he's technically after me. So all I was really gonna add, because honestly, you guys have pretty much said a lot of the things that were in mind already. But one of my favorite quotes of that, I wrote it down, was, if Jesus was alive today, he would be a young lord. Like, or a revolutionary. It doesn't have to be just a young lord. You know what I'm saying? But like, that argument all the time is so frustrating when it comes to, I don't know, these like Christo-fascist people. But rather than looking at it in a negative light, because I was in a community conversation today and we were thinking about ways that we can work together and all of that kind of stuff. I was thinking while we were all talking, I used to be really skeptical about the churches with the rainbows and all that stuff, because like I had heard, certain people trying to communicate with those pastors or whatever the clergy members' names were. And that it was more like love the sinner, not the sin, or something along those lines, where like essentially they were still saying like what LGBTQ people were doing was wrong, but we still love you as a person. So essentially still trying to change them. But I think that is probably a good place for us to start putting, sowing those seeds. Is, I mean, they already have the institution, they already have the building. It might be a good place for us as just like on a local level. I might just be coming to this realization myself, other people might already be doing this. Just because I have a weird relationship with the church too, so I kind of tend to stay away. But I think that that could potentially be a good place for us to start having these conversations. Like, when I when I went to the Poor People's Army boot camp, and I heard that there was going to be like an 85-year-old nun there, I was like, I'm sorry, what? The last time that I dealt with an 85-year-old nun, I was in 5th grade and she was not nice to me. Okay. So I was super thrown off by it. You know what I mean? But, this lady was, she was incredible. She was a revolutionary. She's marched with Poor People's Army for years. I want to say she lived in Pakistan for like 20 years, doing mostly medical work out there for, I'm not really sure. I don't want to tell her story wrong, but she was incredible to listen to and share space with. You know what I mean? So like there was people from all different, you know what I mean, everywhere. They're literally physical, physical location. Not ideology. I don't know the terms to use, but it was really a beautiful space, and it kind of did open my eyes a little bit more to remembering what I got out of the church stories. You know what I mean? When I did believe in that stuff, because I do believe in those stories, and I do believe that the Jesus stories have a purpose behind them. I just think that they're used for more damage than good at this point, and we should probably find the good versions of it. And I don't know how to finish my thought process, but I think you get what I'm saying.
No doubt. No. Appreciate that, Conrad. You said Elder Che had his hand up?
Correct.
All right, go ahead, Che.
First of all, we need to understand that during the 60s, that everybody was in uproar. There was all political movements all over the place. All these changes in the 60s gave rise to consciousness within the churches. Churches began looking at situations differently. I'm quite sure that the Black Panther Party had on several occasions, they had entrance to the church to provide the children with food, etc., etc., etc. I'm pretty sure the Panthers did that too. But that is contributed to the fact that the 60s brought about a lot of changes. Now, in speaking of the Young Lords, which I'm one of them, I was a Young Lord since before the Young Lords were formed. I was a Young Lord because I was in '69. I established the first Young Lord Party in Attica. The first one. It was hard. It wasn't easy. It was me and another brother named Jose Paris. So, and then I got transferred out to Greenhaven Prison, and I went to Greenhaven Prison. I established the second chapter of the Young Lords Party at the New York State prison system. So I've been doing a lot of organizing throughout my years. And as a result of that, I've also been abused and tortured and everything else. I was almost killed in Attica as a result of that. But when you're a revolutionary in prison, you give your life up for the cause. And you know that that in the process, anything may happen to you at any given moment, because you put yourself in the forefront. And especially the system inside is no joke. Prison is no joke. It's not a joke. But anyway, talking about the Young Lords, I know all of them. I knew all of them. the Central Committee, everything. I knew Mickey Melendez. I lived right down upstairs from Mickey Melendez. He lived downstairs with Jennifer Dawn, and I lived upstairs with my wife at that time. You know, and we used to talk, and he told me so many stories of the Young Laws. And you know, during that time that the Young Laws had taken the church, there was all kinds of activities that were going on in that church. A lot of activities. There was medical activities. There was recreational activities. Kids were having fun. It was just only it wasn't just only breakfast programs. It was a lot of other activities that was happening. And the establishment couldn't do excuse the words, couldn't do shit about it. And they knew it. Because especially the reverend of the church, he already put himself, at first he put himself in the slammer when he denied the entrance to the Young Laws. The people in the community were the ones that put pressure on him. That's what they don't tell you. People in the community put a lot of pressure on that reverend, and that reverend had no other choice but to open up the doors to the Young Laws. You know, and the Young Laws was having political education as well in that church. A lot of Puerto Ricanos that were in the church were politicized. For the first time in their life, they were able to hear Puerto Rican history. A lot of them didn't know it because a lot of them came from the streets. You know, there was a lot of people from the streets in there, as well as a lot of regular people in the church. And the regular people, for the first time in their history, they were able to hear history being told by us, not by the system, but by us. Because when the system tells you the history of Puerto Rico, they tell you another story, which is a lie. You know, but when the Young Laws, as an example, told the story of Puerto Rico, it was the truth. You see, and that's dialectics, man. So, you know, the truth and the lie, they both coincide, but eventually the truth overpowers the lies. And so, you know, the Young Laws is you know, they contributed a lot. And not only was the church, but there were people outside, you know, surrounding, they don't tell you this, but surrounding the police in case the police made any attempts to you know, to assault, you know, to move in on the church. They couldn't do it because there was too many people outside. There was a lot of Young Laws obtained as a result of that takeover in the church. There was a lot of support that came out of that. Just like there was a lot of support that came out of the takeover of the hospital, Lincoln Hospital. A lot of support came out of that. There were some doctors that gave up their positions as doctors and became Young Laws. Became Young Laws. So, you know, revolution is powerful, man. I'll say that. Revolution is a powerful tool, especially when it's in the right hands. That's all I got to say.
All power to the people. And I forgot, I left out Shanti. She a young lord up in Chicago. Got a chance to meet her this past a couple weeks ago when Cha-Cha's birthday.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you could make it on here, comrade. At that birthday, we also met. We've been reading about Juan Gonzalez. Juan Gonzalez actually was at Cha-Cha's birthday party a few weeks ago up in Chicago. We had that. If y'all watch Democracy Now!, then y'all know who Juan Gonzalez is. He's on there, but he came out there to support Cha-Cha. You know what I mean? I thought that was big. Got a chance to meet that comrade. But yeah, like Jorge said though, it was a think about this. After that occupation at that hospital, the views of Puerto Ricans started to be changed in the community, where they started to look at them not as just the what the establishment was saying. They started looking at these young and remember the young lords. A lot of them was young. They was in their teenage years. You know what I mean when they occupied that. So it forced them to deal with contradictions, those stereotypes that the system said about Puerto Ricans. You know what I mean? Now they seeing Puerto Ricans feeding young children. Now they seeing Puerto Ricans giving free medical care to the people in the community. They see the Puerto Ricans preaching the message that the church supposed to be preaching about helping the poor and oppressed. They actually doing it themselves. These ones with the berets on. That a lot of them was like, the children of Che Guevara. They said they called them. You know what I mean? But it also educated them about what the revolution was about the community, supporting the community. So this is a part of that class struggle that they were contending with the system. You know what I'm saying? And by doing so in such an aggressive way, they was forced to change the narrative of what it meant to be a Puerto Rican. It even gave Puerto Rican a sense of a better sense of themselves. You know what I'm saying? Because they started the possibilities of what they can be, and not just adhere to the stereotype and stigmatization that they've been fostered with and had to deal with and wrestle with their whole life. Exactly. So this is the thing that we should get out of this story. Did you want to say something, Shanti?
Yes. You have to keep in mind that these were Taino Boricua youth that took over this church and still put their foot down and still did what revolutionaries are supposed to do, especially even when Fred Hampton was assassinated. They were still putting their foot down, taking over that church, still doing what was necessary for the community in a institution that has been used for the colonization and the genocide of the indigenous peoples here in Abya Yala, and for the enslavement and the kidnapping of my indigenous African ancestors and them being brought here, and also instilling religion for nefarious colonialist purposes on our homeland. So the fact that it was the youth that made this possible, and Taino Boricua youth that were teaching other Taino Boricuas about their own history, like it was the fact that they were starting to hear their Taino ancestors' voices once and for all, because you have to understand they were coming from the streets, created by, made possible by colonialism and capitalism, being told that they're too loud, that all these stereotypes, all of these caricatures that have been put out to the masses about Boricua people in general, especially Boricua children and youth, and for them to finally hear their history, to finally hear their ancestors' voices was very, very important, especially for back then, and with the Black Panther Party as well. We did, they were doing the same things as well. African people teaching other African people about African history, about our history, reclaiming our destiny once and for all, to finally hear our ancestors' voices as well. And I believe one of the mayor's people, going in that church and not leaving out for 2 hours. I mean, that was a big deal. That was a big deal, especially given that, all the mayors of New York, especially, they're fascists. I mean, we all know that. But the fact that this person was told to go in that church and still stayed beyond 15 minutes, that shows you what happens when you actually start listening to us. That's what happens when you have a breakthrough. We have a breakthrough here, people. So, like, the fact that that person stayed is a prime example of what happens when class suicide goes exactly how it's supposed to be. You know, up your position in these colonialist capitalist entities in order to finally listen to the community, to finally show up for the community, to actually work with the community for unity and eventually liberation and self-determination of all oppressed people to actually happen. Because once again, these were Taino Boricua youth that made this possible. So it's very important for us to see religion beyond, beyond most of its current forms being organized and all of that, to think beyond the neo-colonial purposes of such places, of such ideologies, for our people to finally unify and to actually work together, putting our foots down once and for all, and declare that enough is enough. We are taking back our resources, we are taking back our communities, we are taking back our destiny once and for all. And with that, it's very, very important to commit class suicide, because you are against what the colonial system wants you to be, what they want you to. And so for that to actually happen the way it did, the way that they did the programs, the breakfast programs, with children having fun in that church, and still having cleaning up the church after they were done with their thing. That was especially important. Because once again, young people doing that, people my age doing that at that time, it was a big deal, and it's still a big deal. So it's important for us to commit class suicide and to use, especially things like religion, in order to actually unify our community, to actually liberate our community, to finally hear our ancestors' voices, and to become a self-determining people, once and for all, and to finally embrace and proclaim and reclaim who we are.
Thank you,
Right on.
Auntie. I'm gonna bring a few of my brown beret comrades in here because there's a lot of y'all here today. I'm gonna just call somebody out. You know what I mean? I know how you pronounce your name, Asley. Is that how you pronounce your name?
Yeah, he said it right. Can you guys
All
hear
right.
me?
Yeah, pleasure to have you on here. What did you think about this chapter that we've been reading?
Well, first, thank you guys for having me. I was really excited when my partner is Junior. And he sent me a message sending me the link, and I was like, no way. No, I'll be on right now. Even though I'm working too, so I just want to share that with y'all. So I think number one thing that really, it doesn't cease to amaze me how engraved racism is in our neighborhoods, to the point where they don't gotta worry about them destroying us. We're already doing it ourselves, because they've, put a liquor store at every corner in the hood, while in fancy neighborhoods, there's you can't even get it at a grocery store. And to me, that really speaks volumes, because our relatives all across Turtle Island are affected by this all the time. And it makes me emotional, because there are children that are watching their parents just give it all up to alcohol and to almost anything at this point. Even in the res, my partner and I were recently watching a documentary about how the nearest, I think it's Clay White Clay or something like that, the nearest place they could buy alcohol from, and it's white people selling it to the last of their lineage, you know, to the last of them. And you know, my partner and I don't know our language, and it's because we're so we're detribalized, you know. I know Purepecha because my family brought that to me, and at a very young age I was speaking Tarasco without knowing, and it really hurts to see that, you know. It doesn't matter how much we put effort into all these different things, but if we're not paying attention to the next generation, we're going to fail them, and we're going to fail them hard. And it's because we don't have all the tools purposely. We were purposely put on the other side of the tracks, and purposely put on the fields, and purposely, you know, like, our people are still in the field. Yeah, and it just continues, and it's so disheartening to see that at the very very beginning this was still an issue, and it's still a reoccurring issue, and it's only getting worse. I see it in my eyes. Population's growing, and our world is not sustaining itself the way we need to, and that, as in, like, I think that's my indigenous side, that I can't let go of what's so pure, is our madre tierra, our earth, that's just, you know, leaving. And I think when I was hearing you read, you know, I was hearing all of you guys read, but Comrade, the first Comrade, you were reading first, and I think for me, the intention of how you were reading it was very profound, because I knew that this is not just another book, you know. This is not just another. To me, this is our history. This is the stuff that I wish was in our curriculum. And right now, I don't know if you guys know about Candace Reed, but she was like a woman who taught math, and she went on in front of her classroom dressed up with fake feathers, and made herself a headdress, and was singing Sakatoa. And that's the history they teach. And to me, this is insane. But I started working on a curriculum soon after that, with a group of a community. We got on the butts of people at RSUD, and they said, here, handle it. So now we're working on 8th grade and 5th grade. And to me, that we're doing okay, but I would really, and we can only do it in California. So like, we're missing out on the rest of the world, you know. And I feel like if we don't get into that, if we don't start educating our young people, they don't even have to be in schools anymore, you know. Like, you guys had a church. You guys were working straight out of church, had everything. And that's what I guess we aspire to be, you know, one day, be able to sustain our own community without having to go, you know, to the government to figure it out. But thank you guys for giving me space to, like, word vomit. I guess I don't know another word to say. Thank you.
Hey, it's a pleasure to have you on here, comrade. And the ones that this is their first time coming on, we do this every week, Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. We got another one Sunday, which comrade Gabby that's on here that was reading. She does that at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And then on Mondays at I want to say what's it, 8 or 9 o'clock, Alyssa?
8 p.m.
8 p.m. Eastern time.
And Tuesday.
Yeah, so 3 times a week. We doing a Young Lord's book right now. But before that, we did a Jiba Warrior by Dennis Banks, talking about the history of the American Indian movement. So we the goal is to study all of our histories of the Second Rainbow Coalition, the Black Panther Party, the Brown Berets, the Young Lords, the White Panthers, all the different groups that made up the Second Rainbow Coalition, so we can know our own history. So when we talk about we are part of the Brown Berets, we know like our history about what the Brown Berets. The next one actually is going to be one of the comrades that's on here right now, and I'm going to ask him to speak next. Johnny Torres. We reading his book. The anthology, I want to say, and it's a lot of the comrades that's in the Brown Berets today. Some of the elders that's in the that was a part of the movement back in the days. That's still united with the Second Rainbow Coalition today. So yeah, we'll be reading his book next. I want to say. You want to speak about this a little bit? This chapter of Johnny Torres. I know we getting close to 2 hours on here, but I definitely like to get everybody's input before we close out these book readings.
Yeah, what's going on, brother? And what's going on, everybody else?
Right now.
Yeah. It was an interesting chapter. It definitely reminded me of I guess the old days when I was I guess a Catholic, and I was in church, and I had to go through a lot of stuff, being told a lot of lies about Jesus being white and all this other crap, but as time progressed, you kind of figured this wasn't for me and this religion. I'm just about the people and everything. You focus on the things you should focus on, but if I don't know, I really don't make a big deal much about religion. If it makes you happy, go for it, I guess, but definitely not my thing. But I definitely love how the young lords focus on what they had to do, and they pushed on. I guess it definitely shows on each chapter how they got stronger, and with the numbers, what they were doing, especially how they use garbage as a weapon, and now they're taking over the hospitals because they don't like how things were going, especially for their own people. So it's good how they definitely took charge. Definitely could, you can grow on that as a person, as an activist. I guess things how they are now with your community, and try to do whatever you can. I guess that's the reason why I end up writing the books I write, and the anthologies that I guess we'll be reading next soon. But I'll definitely I guess send you that PDF as soon as possible for that, I guess, because we'll be on there like in a week and a half or whatever. But yeah, I can't wait. There is a lot of important activists and Brown Berets and some young lords. I think maybe two participated in the anthology, and the rest were Brown Berets and other activists that wanted their voice heard, were poets, and had a very unique origin story to put on for everyone to learn from. So I definitely can't wait for that. Anything else I should add?
Nope. I know Zen reached out to you about the PDF. I think she might have got the dates mixed up because this book is pretty long. We're gonna be on here.
Okay. Well, I'll
October.
just give it to y'all. Give it to y'all anyway, just to hold on to it.
Okay. But yeah,
Yeah.
we'll be starting your book. I want to say October the 8th. The
Oh,
last
that's
day,
cool.
October the 6th. But I definitely encourage everybody. I'm glad all the ones that came on today. Like we do this all the time. So this is a part of us teaching us our own history. You know what I mean? This is where the political education that we didn't get in colonial schools come from. You know what I mean? So yeah, I can't wait to read Johnny Torres' book. We're gonna learn a lot about the Brown Berets, a lot of with this generation, because we got to speak to our generation of leaders too. Our generation of leaders talking to our generation of revolutionaries. You know what I mean? It's good that we study the past, but hearing from the comrades of our future, this is inspiring too. I'm glad that y'all got a chance to read my book. That I could convey. How I became a revolutionary. So reading Johnny Torres, I think it's gonna have the same type of effect that we learning from other comrades just like us in the same historical time period, and we teaching each other how we got to move forward, how we got to become revolutionaries, how we became revolutionaries. You know what I mean? So I think we all looking forward to that.
Yeah, one more thing. I believe that, not only like your books and a lot of other revolutionary books that are out there, they're more like the blueprint of this generation's revolutionary movement and where they
Right.
stand. That's the key that we're doing these, because we already learned all the stuff that we had to, rather if it was from the streets, prison, we learned all this knowledge, and now we figured, you know what, now it's time to share the knowledge. And
Right.
that's what we're doing, and it's definitely making a difference, because people are they're being more stronger in their mind, and they're making more of a stance. So I believe what we're doing is really good, and it's definitely gonna pave way for the future, I believe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I see comrade Yessie got her hand up.
Hello, hello. Hope everyone is having a great evening.
Absolutely.
I definitely love these study groups. I definitely love learning about the history, learning about not only Chicano Mexica culture, but just across the board. AIM, the Young Lords, the Black Panthers, the White Berets. And I'm very grateful because I never thought that I would be able to get this knowledge, especially with this kind of community where we all come from different backgrounds, where we all bring something to the table, our own experiences, our own survivals, our own ways of healing and empowering each other, and being able to come together and have a united front. We may have squabbles here and there or whatever it is, but at the end of the day, we're here for the cause. We're here for the movement. We're here for the bigger picture. We know that all the personal stuff we got, sure, it does affect us, affects the way we handle ourselves, but that's why we have to be able to be 100% when we're here with the community, when we're here working with them, when we're here, observing, protecting, and also educating and decolonizing ourselves. But it all starts with us. We can't pour from an empty cup. And so growing up, I was raised Catholic, baptized Catholic, raised Christian, and then my mom would always go between being Christian to Catholic to Jehovah's Witness. So I never understood. But growing up, I didn't fit in or anything, because everything that they preached, I went to Nazarene church, something like that. I can't remember what the church was called, but it was a church ran by older Caucasian people, definitely an older generation, and I was like one of the few people of color in there. And I could tell that they treated me differently, but I was kind of like the token minority, so to speak. And so I would feel out of place. And like, I remember they had rented out the basement because it was a big church to a Latino Christian church, and they would play music like completely different, like night and day. Music they could dance to. They encourage, self-expression and stuff. And they would get mad if we went to the other service. And for me, I mean, I grew up, I'm a tech, like what you would consider first gen, but we've always been here. So my first language was Spanish, and I missed that. I wanted that experience, and so I would go, and they would get upset. And they ended up, I think they terminated the lease with them or something, but they didn't come back. And so also hearing like you're going to go to hell if you are LGBTQ plus two-spirit, if you deviate from being heterosexual, if you deviate from these social norms that are constructed. And so it's crazy how outsiders, people from outside the church who may be atheists or believed in different religions, whatever the case, they have to show them how to act, how to be a decent human, how to treat one another, how to utilize a space, not for profit, but for the people. Like, well, WWJD, right? They always preach that. And so a lot of times, and that's why I went away from the church. I couldn't agree with what they were teaching and preaching, and it wasn't for me. And so I've also read Johnny's books. I'm working on The Voices of the Revolution, Volume 1. And then I've read his Resurrecting Evangel and Revolutionary Diaries. And so for me, it was really just eye-opening and inspiring to see a brown beret doing poetry, revolutionary poetry, and having that documented history. And so I started writing poetry myself when I was in elementary school, on and off. It just I kind of write when it calls to me or when it channels through me, just like with my art pieces. But based on the theme of the evening, would it be okay to share a poem that I wrote?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. This is one of my newest poems. It's called Permiso. Con el permiso de mi madre, I've been kissed and blessed by the sun, danced our suffering through ceremony, wept and purged generational trauma within our mother's womb, called upon my ancestors to guide me to salvation. Have you prayed and feasted with your dead, felt their spirits send shivers down your spine as you call upon their name? Todos mi antepasados presente. Can you hear their whispers in the wind calling you home? To live is to survive, but it's so hard to thrive in a world sent to damnation. We were born out of sin, yet I'm still your creation. But according to your script, I'm not worth your salvation, but you made me in your image. Confused by contradiction, sifting for the truth. There is no free will in the simulation. Remember, I am your creation, a product of my society reinforced through lifetimes. Pandora's box, there is no escape of the end of times. My revelation, to live my truth, is to be damned. Yet I am your creation. My only sin was to exist and want a better life. My love will send me to hell. I'll be damned if I do, I'll be damned if I don't. But I prefer immediate gratification. So I choose to live my truth, to make hell on earth bearable. I'll deal with the consequences later after I've been damned for eternity, but at least I got to live authentically, to love and be loved freely. I'm a sinner to my core, and I do not repent for the heart that beats within my chest. Remember, you made me in your image. I inherited your traits. To damn me to hell is to damn yourself as well. So, Holy Father, please escort me to my cell.
Wow. Yeah,
Beautiful.
that was perfect. And it had a lot of irony in it, though. You know what I mean? Stuff
A
I
lot.
think us wrestle with when we was going through those churches and stuff. Like, it was like, how are we supposed to be damned that you created us? You put the
Exactly.
tree out here and don't eat this tree and stuff. I never understood none of that shit, even though I believed at one point, you know what I mean? But it used to always like, and for us, for colonized people, it's an irony. Like, we was always told that black people uh uh was cursed to be slaves and stuff, like the Hammond curse.
Mhm.
A lot of y'all heard about the Hammond curse when Ham discovered his father without clothes on, and then black people was cursed to be slaves and stuff. You know what I mean? That's the irony of that poem that you drew out of that. So like, hey, escort me to that cell too. But it's this motherfucker with us. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes. And it's also just like tracking my growth because I would say I'm more of a spiritual person. I am a monastic dancer. And so
Mm-hmm.
when I've danced or suffering through ceremony, when I didn't know that my family actually were Aztec dancers before, Mexica danzantes, until I joined out in California and then here in Colorado. And that's my mom and my aunts. They were danzantes in Mexico growing up. But
Mm-hmm.
then my mom, she said that as she got older, she got ashamed of it. And
Mm-hmm.
even with me, like as I decolonize myself and educate myself, I'm trying to break generational curses and traumas and try to
Right.
pass it down to my parents because my mom, she hates pretty much everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But she's her life. And just based off of stereotypes and what she's heard and stuff, she thinks that black and white people are the worst.
Mm-hmm.
And she even hates Chicanos, like, because of how she's been treated, because they're
Right.
migrants, even though we're all you know, the same blood, the same land, like here we go, the same struggles. So,
Right.
but growing up, she's, and to this day, she still rejects our Native American heritage, our indigenous root, even though
Mm-hmm.
she would do limpias, and she still does them to me today. But she's like, that's a secret. You don't share that. You don't talk about that. Because of the negative connotation of brujeria, because of the churches.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was always kept hidden. And then, like growing up, I would always wear braids, and I still do. Um, and and I would be barefoot, and she would like be like, put on some shoes, pareces India. I'm like, well, we are indigenous, we are Indians, we are Native Americans, we're from here. Like, where did our families come from? You know,
Mm-hmm.
and you ask them, it's like, oh, well, we've always been in Durango or Chihuahua, or this is where our family came from, but it was always the northern part of Mexico. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, well, as I'm learning here, I'm trying to educate my family and have those conversations. Because they didn't have that opportunity. My mom was put to work after sixth grade to support the family. My dad only went to second grade and was put to work in the mines, in the fields, hard manual labor. So yeah, it's empowering to have these classes, to have this community. And I've seen growth in myself, and in my healing, and I can put it onto paper. And hopefully it can reach someone and help them through the day.
Yeah, and then we need some more Johnny Torres, women Johnny Torres. So hey, more you write those type of, because that was very empowering. I read Resurrect the El Barrio too. You probably saw my forward in there to this book. I told Johnny Torres in there, I said he like the black Langston Hughes. You know what I mean? I'm in the brown,
Yes.
kind of
That's what
Langston.
I'm talking about right there.
Yeah, that's what I felt.
Yesy?
Yeah, it was like a very powerful capture of his revolutionary journey in poetry. You know what I mean? So yeah, I really liked that. But yeah, that was powerful, sis. And I think you definitely consider doing something like that as well. You know what I mean? Because we need like more books for our generation that speaks to us. Because we a generation in itself that has a different, unique history. You know what I mean? We the generation that the Black Panthers was destroyed, the Young Lords was destroyed, a lot of the White Panther, different organizations. The Brown Berets, I think y'all outlasted and stayed around for a while. You know what I'm saying? And but a lot of us is rebuilding. You know what I mean? Like we're reconnecting to this legacy. You know what I'm saying? So like speaking to this generation, I think hearing from other ones in our generation is powerful and inspiring. You know what I mean? So I appreciate that, comrade.
Yes, definitely. We all gotta, represent where we come from, claim everything that we are, what we've survived, and pass it on. Because it's about survival of the next generation to keep this fight going. Um, you know, and without unity, we can't do anything. It'll just fall. It'll just crumble.
Yeah. If you ever want a copy of my book, just hit me up, DM me on Messenger, and I'll send you a copy. That's anybody on here. Just send me your email, and I'll send y'all a free copy of my PDF of my autobiography.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you so much, comrade.
No, they're all power to the people. I see Junior got his hand up, and then we'll go to Gabby. And after that, if anybody else have any closing comments, go ahead, Junior.
Hey, comrade, can you guys hear me?
Yep, we
Yep.
can hear you.
All right, good. Cool. Well, thank you for allowing us, to be part of this Rainbow Coalition reading. First time attending, and also my partner is there with our beautiful daughter, Xochitl. She just turned a year actually last week, her first little birthday. But yeah, it's our first time attending this meeting. It's powerful, right? All this knowledge that has been documented. Um, it's powerful. And I agree with what the sister just said about passing the knowledge. And every time our elders share that knowledge and wisdom, I want to share it to our youth, from our local regions, or going to the hood and just spreading that word, just like what the Christians do, right? They go to the hoods and they spread, their word. But now it's our turn, right, to like go and spread the revolution love. And I like that quote. Revolutionary, it's all love, man. That's powerful. Um, I was also going to mention about like, I don't know what year is it because I don't want to misinterpret, but danza, Mexica danza. There's also another thing, concha danza or conchero danza, I believe. I know that back in the day, like to dance Mexica danza, it was like if you were ever to do it, like they'll beat you, like they're like straight up, like I think it was banned. But I know that back in the day, the Catholics they've actually allowed danzantes to dance inside the temple so that they wouldn't get caught. And that's how nowadays, there's danza mexica and there's also conchero danza. I wouldn't attend to a conchero danza. I would, prefer to do mexica danza with my partner. But, I don't want to give also praise with the Catholics, what they did. But I mean, I do want to give them a shout out for allowing, back in the day, people to do ceremonial danza in the churches, right? To keep on the tradition alive. And 50 years later, there's about maybe hundreds and hundreds of danzas all across of Turtle Island. So that's beautiful. But I also wanted to touch bases on what like the elder said, Jorge Nieves. You know, that's awesome, man. Like I've never spoken or heard of a young lord on the same room as I am. So, you know, your words and your uh putting in work, for the revolutionary, that's acknowledged. And I want to tell you that, you are acknowledged. You're a badass revolutionary elder. There's also the elders in the Brown Berets, but I also look up to the Young Lords elders, to the Black Panther elders, to the White Panthers. I know there was a brother here, and I think his name was Robert. I've actually met him at a justice event. I think he's gone by now. But yeah, I actually met him before, man. But anyways, yeah, thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm not trying to take so much space, but also Kamati. Appreciate you guys.
All
Uh,
power.
people, I appreciate that, comrade. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We have a lot of respect for the elders. That's why I said coming on here. When we finish this book, actually, I think it's probably gonna be that Sunday, October the 8th. We're gonna have the elders, young lords on here. David Rivera, he was one of the original ones. Was it original 7 or 8? Which one was it, Alyssa? 7 or 8? With Cha Cha and them when they formed the Young Lords. He's gonna be on here. Cleo Silver, she was a Young Lord and a Black Panther at a different time. Jorge Nieves, uh, Omar Lopez, he was one of the Young Lords in Chicago. He's gonna come on here, and we do that to bring them on to talk about the books after we get done reading, so we can ask the elders questions directly. You know what I mean? We had Aaron Dixon on here when we finished his book, My People Are Rising. He was the leader of the Seattle chapter of the Black Panther Party. But yeah, whenever we can, we try to bring the elders on here, at least at the end of the reading, so we can ask them questions. Our generations can ask them questions. You know what I mean? So most definitely, appreciate you coming on here and sharing those words, Gabby. And then we'll probably close it out because we over 2 hours in. I try to keep it hour and a half, 2 hours. But go ahead, Gabby.
Right on, right on. I was just going to comment on what Comrade Yessi was saying, about if you do this, if you do this, if you do that, if you say this, if you believe in this, you're going to go, if you're going to quote unquote go in hell. If you're queer, if you're this and if you're that, you're going to be condemned to hell. Fuck that bullshit, because actually saying how am I going to be condemned in hell when you made me in your image? That makes no fucking sense to me. Even if I am condemned for hell, fuck it. Okay, I don't care. I'd rather be condemned to hell and be surrounded by revolutionaries and people who love me than be saved and go to heaven with a bunch of pricks, a bunch of white supremacist bastards that don't give a fuck about anyone but themselves. So so yeah, and as I think you were saying, Comrade Kwame, we can't just ignore and we can't just leave out people who are religious. The majority of the people on the globe are religious. To be anti-theist is to be anti-proletarian. Like I said, religion is not inherently reactionary. Religion, just like the gun and just like the state, just like education, religion is not inherently reactionary. It's who co-opts it and how it is used that determines whether it is revolutionary or reactionary. The shit that the United States is doing today is the same shit that the Roman Empire did to Christianity. It's the same playbook. They're whitewashing it, co-opting it, and twisting it to uphold their own class interests and to uphold white supremacy. Everything within a capitalist society, the institutions are all structured to cater to the bourgeois. So what do we have to do? We have to make our own institutions that are catered to the masses, to the proletariat. That's what we have to do. And we have to, and that includes using religion like Christianity and using it in a revolutionary sense to decolonize how Christianity has been fucking used and to use that as a revolutionary presence, because not a lot of people know this, but Christianity has a revolutionary history in the United States. Hell, one of the most radical, one of the most revolutionary people who ever lived, John Brown, was a Christian, and if I remember correctly, the reason why he started killing slavers was because he thought that that's what Jesus would do. That's revolutionary right there. So right on.
Absolutely, Comrade Gabby. Junior's daughter just turned 1 year old today. He wants us to wish her a happy birthday, so we're gonna give her a revolutionary happy birthday. Shout out from the Second Rainbow Coalition. Is she by you right now, Comrade?
Yeah, but she's crying right now.
Wait, show her real quick.
Well, maybe our harmonious voices collectively might
yes.
her spirit a little bit. Y'all want to wish her a happy birthday together?
Hell yeah.
All right. What's her name?
Her name is Sochi Lyot, but you guys can call her Sochi.
Sochi.
Oh, there she is, crying.
Sochi. Okay.
Sochi.
All right, let's kick it off, y'all. Happy birthday.
Come on, y'all. Come on.
Come on. Here, hold on. I'm gonna step out of my job site to do this.
All right. Back to start over.
Okay.
Can she hear us?
Yeah, she can hear you.
Okay. All right. Let's get
on, guys,
on the same rhythm, though.
I just step outside. All right, you guys ready?
Yep.
All right.
Happy birthday. Happy
birthday to you.
Happy
birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Sochi. Happy birthday to you. Hey.
Oh, all power to the people.
Sorry.
Like Comrade Junior said, that's a revolutionary seed right there. One of the next generation of revolutionaries.
Right on. Yo,
That's what
Ashley,
I'm happy,
Ashley.
guys.
Don.
No problem.
Um,
Well, I appreciate that. Collective solidarity song for the comrades, baby. If anyone wants to jump on to the next one, that'd be Sunday. Comrade Gabby will be leading that. That's at 2 p.m. We always use the same link. So you can just use the link that you use to get on here, copy it, paste it, put it somewhere. You know what I mean? You can always have it. Then the one after that will be Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Again, the same link. So until then, all the comrades around the country, I hope y'all have a great evening. And as always, all power to the people.
all power. Hold up. Wait a second, Comrade Kwame. I'm gonna send the link to the to the chat, to the chat room, so that way everyone can have an opportunity to save this in case they forget. So I'm gonna send it to the chat. I'm gonna send the link. Yep.
Okay. Well, everybody used the link to get on here, so I think everybody got access to it.
Right.
All right. All power to the people, comrades.
All power to the people.
All power.
See y'all
All
next Friday.
power to the people.
All right now. Take care.
All right, I'll power.